Hi, good morning, and welcome to episode 7 of Furman Transformation Podcast. I've got a very important topic for today, and I want you to really listen very close today because this is a very, very important topic, specifically in really setting up your company for how it's going to be viewed by everybody. And that will most likely determine whether you are successful or not. So the topic of today is going to be perception in tech. Okay, because the industry we focus on is tech. It's going to be perception in tech. So specifically perception geared toward tech companies. Okay. Now a lot of guys that are launching these startups, San Fran and all over the world with these new technology companies. Some of them may be younger, and perception is not really a concept that you may be familiar with. So I think it's worth really diving into, first of all, defining what is perception. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about. So first of all, to understand perception, you have to understand that there's really two sides to it. There's truth or actuality, and then perception. So truth or actuality is literally what you are, raw, uncut, unfiltered. That's the truth. That's the actuality of the situation. Whatever situation you're in, specifically with your business, that is the state of your business, that is what your business does, that is how your business does it, and every other factor that defines what you are. Okay, that's truth actuality. Now, you have that for better or worse. Also, you have perception for better or worse. Now, what perception is it may be aligned with truth and actuality, but not always. Sometimes perception makes you look better. Sometimes perception makes you look worse. Sometimes perception just makes you look different. But understand that truth and actuality and perception, or how you're perceived by other people, is often two very, very different things, and are not always aligned with each other. Okay, so being aware of these two concepts is very important. Okay, now perception doesn't mean that there's always one perception that everybody's seeing it through, because many people see many things through different lenses. But perception, obviously in business, now also in tech, you always want to do what's best for your company. You always want to do what's best for your employees, what's best for your customers. So you always want to have your truth and actuality to be ultimate. You want to do always the best. But you also have to give value and pay attention to making sure that you're perceived that way. You're perceived as good. You're perceived as the best. You're perceived as altruistic. Because if you're doing all those things, but you're not putting work into making sure that you're perceived that way, you can lose clout and you can lose your positioning as being that. And all of that hard work that you're putting into it is going to be wasted away, or you could be made to look worse. So it's very, very important that you put work into crafting and working on your perception. Okay? That being said, I want to really break this down for the sake of this episode into two parts. So the first part we're going to focus on is altruism. Okay, you're doing good for others. And then the second part is going to be being the best. Okay, so the reason that I say this, first of all, is that you've got so many tech companies coming out right now, and you've got so many technologies. This is all the buzz. Everything it's about to explode, right? And so you being one startup in a pool of maybe 100 or 1,000 others trying to do the same exact thing, you need to make sure. I mean, if you want to be successful, if you want all that money that you raised behind you to equate to something substantial, you've got to make sure that you're crafting the right perception for your company. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, we'll start with altruism, right? Or doing good for others. Okay? Every company, okay, that's successful, truly successful, typically at a certain point, not always in the beginning, but at a certain point, they'll partner with a charity or do some kind of donations. They'll find a cause that they believe in, a charitable cause, and they'll associate themselves with that cause. Okay? Now, if a lot of your startups, you may not be at this point yet, but I believe that it's something that should be expedited. Because, first of all, having a cause associated with you, it makes you, first of all, it makes you out to be a better person, because you're not just doing it, or a better company, because you're not just in it for the money, which you are in it to create something, and of course the money, everybody's got that, but you want to create something, but you also want to give back on every dime that you make to a cause. And so it makes, you're doing something more than just a self-interest. And that is a good trait to have, but it is also a good perception to have and to cultivate. And so it doesn't cost you much to incorporate that in. Say your objective is to $1 off of every product sold goes to XYZ charity. It doesn't cost you more because it just comes off of the revenue. It's a small price to pay for a big payout, a big dividend of trust, a big dividend of good feelings, a big dividend of a perception that you want. So altruism, I urge these startups, if you want to position yourself as different from everybody else, you want to shine, find a cause, find a charity that you can align yourself with, and not just any charity. Find one that's very interesting. Find one that is very similar to something you're doing, so that not only are you doing something good and you're creating really good PR, but you're also creating really interesting PR, because you want to do something that is like totally different, that you don't hear about, that when that thing hits a press release or hits a newspaper story, people go, whoa, that's cool. Like, they're doing this, but then they're also donating to charity doing that with this technology. That's amazing. That's so cool, right? And now, not only do you have the perception of doing something good, but something good that's also really interesting, that thing could catch on, or will catch on, if done right, like wildfire. So, find a cause. Put some thought into it. Find a charity, find something that you want to align yourself with. Don't just do it to do it, but put some thought into it. Find a good one and really put some work into it. If you need to put some work into it, put some work into it. You've got the resources, but do that. It's going to help you so much in really making yourself set apart from the competition. You're also obviously going to have tax deductions, but more than that, it makes a very interesting story for you, and it puts you in the limelight. It puts you in the spotlight, and it immediately will set you apart from all of your competition. Okay, so that's number one, altruism. Very, very good. And also, that's a good thing, because you do good, you're going to get good back too. So that's just a common principle. Great thing to do. All right. Number two, I want to focus on here is now, okay, so you're perceiving, and there's many other things that you could talk about when it comes to perception, but I think these are the two that startups really need to focus on. So altruism. Number two is, again, you've got 1 million companies in every science and every technology trying to do the same thing with, very, very similarly. They can't all win. There's going to be a lot of money that goes to waste. There's going to be a lot of losers, and there's going to be much fewer winners. But there will be winners. There's always going to be winners. So the question that you need to ask yourself first is, why am I the best? Why is my company the best? Now, if you ask yourself that question and you can't give me an answer, you got a problem. You got a very serious problem, and you need to really take some time to reevaluate what you're doing. And the reason is this, because unless you're the best, you don't exist. As cold as that might sound, that is the harsh truth that you need to hear in this environment, in business, and not only in business, but in this environment in tech right now. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of losers, few winners. So you want to win. You want to be one of those very few that actually win. You've got to differentiate yourself in a massive way. Okay, so why am I the best? You want to start thinking about, what are the differentiators that set you apart from everybody else? What makes you so different that those differentiators set the tone for your entire product, your entire service, and put you miles ahead of the competition that they can't even touch? That's the mentality. Because if you have that mentality, you're going to win with your investors, you're going to win with your customers. All right? So let's take an example of that. So let's just say, for example, gene editing is pretty big now, right? CRISPR technology. So going in there and within the life sciences industry, going in there and actually putting together designer sequences of DNA, where you could essentially reverse aging. You can essentially make tweaks to any part of your anatomy. You could enhance any part of your anatomy. I mean, you're talking about the stuff of movies, science fiction. This is happening. This is real. And so to be able to do that, that's a cool technology, CRISPR technology. There's a lot of companies that are doing it, and obviously there's a lot of pushback from the FDA on that. So if you're doing gene editing and your differentiator is that you are setting up, you have the same quality of anybody that's working in the United States, but you're set up at various clinics and locations across the world where FDA is not a factor, and you're giving the same quality, but because you're not restricted by the FDA, you're getting a quicker rollout of types of services within that. You're going to be able to offer more services faster, and then also because you have less hoops to jump through, you're also getting a tremendously lower price point to the consumer, right? So right off the bat, if I'm a consumer, that sounds pretty good, right? That's a differentiator. That company that might be doing something like that is going to stick out in my head probably more than any other company right now, because I know that company has got some serious convictions about how they're differentiating themselves, and they are doing it. They're doing it. Okay? And so then the other companies just become white noise, or they're just gray, because they don't, they're not, there's nothing to set them apart in my mind as a consumer. Okay? Very important. Now, likewise, that example, and the reason I use that example is because that same differentiator can also be seen as a double-edged sword. Now, how could that be seen as a double-edged sword? Well, another aspect to perception is you have to look at both. You have to look at all sides. So you could also argue on this specific controversial differentiator. You could argue, well, as a consumer, if it's not regulated by the FDA, well, then I don't really trust it. They must be doing some sketchy stuff, right? So, double-edged sword. A consumer could likely think that, okay? Also, and I'm not saying that's the truth, but I'm saying in perception, which perception is different than actuality, that could be seen. That could be thought. Not seen, that could be perceived, right? So so that's one. Now another one is price point. So okay, so you say that you get me a cheaper price point. Well, many consumers, some consumers love cheaper price point. They'll just go nuts for the cheap price point. But a lot of consumers will see cheap price point and they'll say, oh, well, if they're giving a cheap price point, they must have cheap quality, right? And this is another very, very big part of perception, is that consumers tend to look at price point as a sign of value, which sometimes is true, sometimes is not. But typically we are inclined to see a cheaper price and expect we're going to get something of lower quality, or pay a higher price and expect we're going to get something of higher quality. Many times that is true, because if we're coming in at a low price point, we obviously, as a company, can usually give less value for that price point, meaning the consumer's going to get cheaper quality. Whereas if we come in at a higher price point, I've got more resources to get better results for you, so it's going to be a higher quality product or service. But now logically, we know that the reason for this specific example is that because they bypassed the FDA, that's the reason that they're able to lower the price point. So you could then justify that. But so I like to take that example because that, you've got the differentiator, but then you also want to see that from every angle. And there are many, many angles, especially in a controversial situation like that. Now, if you take a normal, more run-of-the-mill example, you could see how just having the differentiator alone would be great. Now, let me just say, good or bad, if you're that company, that gene editing company, you're still really setting yourself apart. So yes, you've got maybe some negative connotation, maybe some positive, but you're still setting yourself apart. In my book, I think that's still putting you miles ahead of the competition, because you've at least set yourself apart from the crowd. You're not just another sheep, okay? But you still want to be pinning yourself in the best light. So you got to keep putting work into that. Always, all the time, always. Okay? Now, a more run-of-the-mill example might be, maybe Snapchat. Now, Snapchat, before they started trying to do Snap and trying to be Facebook and extend to all these other technologies, I think that they probably tried to grow too quick. I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. But when they were just the app, it was genius, because there were other apps before, but really their differentiator was the positioning in the demographic that it would be used for, and how the value could benefit those millennials. Okay, because before it was just sort of this app that was like sort of utilized for maybe promiscuous husbands and wives, or whatever the situation, where you take a picture, it deletes it, you remove it. So, but Spiegel found a way to essentially utilize that technology, positioning it for a demographic. That's the differentiator right there. And then also for that demographic that loves pictures, to say, okay, you've got Instagram, which, you're posting the best version of yourself, but now here's a way that you can share photos with your friends again, but without having to have the accountability of looking perfect all the time. Okay, so what does that do? It allows millennials that have been growing up in the social media era, where everything has had to be picture perfect, and now allow them to actually feel like they can express themselves with their friends again. maybe something that they've never had, if you're on the younger end of that. And so that was the genius behind Snapchat and the differentiator. I think those two things, one, that it was geared toward that demographic of the millennials, and two, that the pictures would automatically delete. And so there's no accountability. And I think those two things were huge in really getting that app to catch on before they tried to be Snap and all this other stuff. And who knows, maybe that'll work out, I don't know. But that was the beauty of Snapchat. So that's what you want to start focusing on, are what are the differentiators and how can you really set yourself apart in a way, not only that you're setting yourself apart, but in a way that's very, very desirable, very, very attractive to investors, but also more importantly to consumers. The people that are going to buy and consume your product, how are you differentiating yourself? Okay, so we talked about altruism. Now we're in being the best. Okay, why are you the best? I think the final thing here you need to ask yourself is not only why are you the best, but how are you showing that you're the best? Okay, because you can be the best. You can say, oh, I'm the best because of this. But if you're not actively showing why you're the best, if you're not putting that out in the right channels, in the right ways, then nobody knows you're the best. You're not. So then you're not the best. You're another loser in the sheep, in the herd of sheep, and you're not going to have success. It's just that simple. The second or the third doesn't win. The first wins. Okay? It's like if you ever watch Glenn Ross, first prize is a new Cadillac Eldorado. Second prize is a set of steak knives. Okay? Anybody want to see third prize? You're fired. That's the truth, and that's the harsh truth, but that's the reality. The consumer decides whether you're hired or fired. And it's really that simple, by whether they buy your product. And they put a vote of confidence, whether or not they put a vote of confidence in your product. So how are you showing you're the best? Well, I think this is where you really kick your PR into gear. Okay, so obviously you've got your charities that you're partnering with, you've got your differentiators. Now you kick that PR into gear. And that is the best tool you have. If you're any of these tech companies right now, PR is the best thing that you have. Not only because it's free, and let me say because it's free, not only because it's free, because it's free. It doesn't cost you anything to do PR if you're smart about it. Okay? You can be putting out press releases. You can be getting on local TV stations, okay, talking about your product. You can be getting in local newspapers, okay? You can be getting on talk radio across the country. These things are not difficult to do. It's as simple as facilitating relationships if you know what you're doing and if you have enough conviction in your product. You have enough conviction in your differentiators. You have enough conviction in why you're the best and why you're the most altruistic and why you're the most interesting. Then you take that to PR and you explode. And that's how you show that you're the best. So again, I think this is a really important episode today, and it's something I want you to really, really think about, really mull it over, really put some thought into, and really start to think about what it is that's going to set you apart. If you don't already have it, if you already have it, you want to figure out how you can further accentuate it, and then also propel that out and show that to the world and show why you're the best, show why you're the most altruistic. But if you don't already have that, you're behind the eight ball. You need to start doing that. And you want to figure out and map out with your team today, yesterday actually, but just start doing it today. If you wanted to do it yesterday, you start doing it today. You want to map out what you're going to do, and then you can kick that into gear. All right, so really put some thought into that. I believe that's going to help you out a lot, and that's a great piece of a great morsel, a great piece of advice. Start putting some thought into perception versus actuality, but you want ultimately those to be aligned in the end, okay? But perception comes first, crafting the perception, obviously the actuality as well. You always want to put your best foot forward, but perception will become reality. All right. So again, thanks so much for listening. It's been a Furman Transformation podcast episode. We're a growth agency. We work with tech companies, growth stage tech companies. We are the sales engine, the marketing engine, the PR engine, the consultant, whatever you need to grow, that's what we do. We are the biz dev. Again, if you've got tech chops, but you don't have the business chops, you want to really start kicking this into gear. You want to set yourself apart, and you want to give yourself a really strong force to set yourself apart from everybody else. You give me a call. That's what I do. So give me a call. My number is 561 at the office, 561-571-0638. Again, it's Jonathan Furman from Furman Transformation, 561-571-0638. And we'll look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks so much.